Know thyself. These two words, carved into the temple of Apollo at Delphi over 2,000 years ago, echo through time, not just as a piece of ancient wisdom, but as a living principle that still guides us today. Imagine standing in the shadow of those marble columns, surrounded by thinkers like Socrates and Plato, who debated ideas so revolutionary they would shape the course of human history. What's astonishing isn't just how old these philosophies are, but how shockingly modern they feel. The questions they asked about justice, happiness, and the nature of reality are the same ones we grapple with now, from our morning coffee chats to late-night internet debates. This isn't just a story about dusty scrolls or forgotten lectures. It's about how 30 groundbreaking ideas from ancient Greece secretly built the world you live in right now. Think about it. Every time you vote, argue about ethics, or even scroll through social media, you're walking paths laid down by philosophers who lived centuries before electricity, let alone smartphones. Their fingerprints are on everything from the way governments function to how scientists approach problems, even to the memes that make us laugh. And here's the wildest part. Many of us have no idea we're speaking their language, living their logic, breathing their insights every single day. So let's pull back the curtain. Over the next 30 revelations, we'll travel from the bustling agora of Athens to your smartphone screen, tracing how these ancient minds hacked the code of human thought. You'll discover how a philosopher's musings on fire and water led to modern chemistry, how a debate about friendship shaped the algorithms that recommend your next Netflix binge, and why a lone thinker's rant about truth might hold the key to fixing social media today. This isn't just history, it's a treasure map to understanding why the world works the way it does, and more importantly, how you can navigate it with the clarity of someone who's been preparing for this moment for 2,500 years. Ready to meet your invisible mentors? Picture this: a bearded man wandering the streets of Athens, stopping people not to preach or lecture, but to ask them questions, simple, relentless questions that unraveled their deepest assumptions. Socrates didn't hand out answers, he weaponized curiosity, turning every conversation into a mirror that revealed how little we truly know. His famous method wasn't about winning arguments or sounding smart. It was a disciplined way to expose contradictions, poke holes in lazy thinking, and force people to build their beliefs from the ground up. Fast forward to today, and you'll find Socrates' fingerprints everywhere. Law schools use his approach to train students to dismantle weak arguments. Therapists borrow his techniques to help clients uncover buried thoughts. Even your favorite podcasts, the ones that feel like lively debates rather than dry lectures, are unconsciously channeling his spirit. The magic isn't in the questions themselves, but in what they trigger, a mental itch that won't go away until you've examined every angle. Think about the last time someone asked you, "Why do you believe that?" and you stumbled through your answer. That discomfort, that's the Socratic method at work. It turns passive acceptance into active exploration, replacing "because I said so" with "let's find out." In a world drowning in hot takes and half-baked opinions, this ancient tool might just be the antidote we need. Not by giving us more answers, but by teaching us how to ask better questions. While Socrates asked questions that shook the foundations of what we think we know, his student Plato took that curiosity somewhere even more daring, into a realm beyond what our eyes can see. He claimed that the world we touch, taste, and experience every day is just a flickering shadow of something far more real, a universe of perfect, eternal forms. Picture a circle drawn in sand, imperfect, wobbly, erased by the next wave. Plato argued that somewhere beyond our senses exists the true circle, flawless and unchanging, and every earthly attempt to draw one is just a faint imitation. This might sound like abstract poetry, but his theory of forms quietly built the scaffolding for modern thought. Think of how mathematicians work. When they describe a triangle, they're not talking about the lopsided doodle in your notebook. They're invoking Plato's perfect form, an idea so precise it can calculate rocket trajectories or design skyscrapers. Even in laboratories, scientists chase idealized models: the perfect gas, the frictionless surface, because, like Plato, they know reality is messy, but truth lives in the abstract. Here's where it gets eerie. Our digital world runs on Plato's vision. Every time a programmer writes code, they're working with pure logic, crafting perfect, if-then, statements that machinery must obey. That glowing screen in front of you, it's built on binary ideals, ones and zeros that don't bend or blur, a language Plato would have recognized instantly. From AI that classifies images to algorithms predicting the weather, we've outsourced his philosophy to silicon. But the real power of forms isn't just in equations or apps, it's in how they shape what we believe is possible. When architects draft a building, they first imagine its essence before laying a single brick. When activists fight for justice, they're appealing to an ideal fairness that no court has ever fully achieved. Plato taught us that progress begins when we stop accepting the world as it is and start reaching for what it ought to be. That tension between the flawed now and the perfect potential is where revolutions are born. Aristotle looked at the chaos of human argument and saw something no one else had: a hidden structure, a set of rules that could turn shouting matches into something far more powerful, a system for uncovering truth. While his teacher Plato chased perfect forms in the clouds, Aristotle rolled up his sleeves and mapped the mechanics of how we think. His genius was recognizing that reasoning isn't some mystical art, it's a step-by-step process, like following a recipe or solving a math problem. He called these steps syllogisms, simple three-part chains where if the first two statements are true, the conclusion must follow. Take his classic example: all humans are mortal. Socrates is a human, therefore Socrates is mortal. At first glance, it seems obvious, but that's the point. Aristotle wasn't just stating facts, he was revealing the invisible tracks our minds ride on to reach sound judgments. Now fast forward 2,000 years, and you'll find his fingerprints on nearly every system that demands clear reasoning. Computer code, it's built on if-then statements that mirror Aristotelian logic. Every time you ask a voice assistant for the weather, it's running through a digital version of his syllogisms to fetch the right answer. Even the algorithms curating your social media feed rely on logical rules Aristotle pioneered: classifying, sorting, and inferring based on predictable patterns. Without his framework, we'd lack the tools to teach machines how to think, let alone debate ethics or diagnose diseases. But here's where it gets fascinating. Aristotle didn't just give us a tool for machines. He handed humanity a mirror to examine our own thinking. Ever been in an argument where someone says, "That doesn't follow," you're invoking Aristotle. When a detective pieces together clues or a scientist tests a hypothesis, they're using his methods to separate solid conclusions from shaky assumptions. Even toddlers negotiating for extra playtime unconsciously stumble into syllogisms. "Mom lets me stay up when I finish dinner. I finished dinner, therefore." Yet his greatest lesson wasn't about winning debates, it was about humility. Aristotle knew logic could expose flawed reasoning, but only if we're brave enough to question our own premises first. In an age of viral misinformation and knee-jerk reactions, that might be his most urgent gift. Not the answers, but the discipline to build ideas that hold up under scrutiny. After all, a syllogism is only as strong as its weakest link, and so are we. Epicurus sat under the olive trees of ancient Athens with a radical idea that still rattles cages today: that pleasure, not virtue or duty, was the proper compass for life. But before you picture wild orgies or bottomless wine goblets, pause right there. That exact misunderstanding, that pleasure means reckless indulgence, is why his philosophy got twisted for centuries. The truth: Epicurus was more Zen monk than frat boy. He defined pleasure not as endless sensual highs, but as the absence of pain, a quiet contentment where hunger is satisfied, the body is comfortable, and the mind is free from fear. Picture the relief when a headache lifts, the deep exhale after resolving a lingering worry. That, to him, was the highest form of happiness. Modern psychology is just catching up to what Epicurus nailed 2 millennia ago. Positive psychology researchers now talk about hedonic adaptation, how we chase flashy pleasures like promotions or luxury purchases, only to quickly return to our baseline happiness. Epicurus saw this trap clearly. He warned against desires that itch but never satisfy, like fame or endless wealth, calling them empty because they demand more fuel but never truly nourish. Compare that to today's science-backed advice to invest in experiences, cultivate gratitude, and savor simple joys. His garden might as well have been the first wellness retreat. But here's where it gets profound. Epicurus didn't just preach moderation, he weaponized it. By deliberately living simply, eating plain bread, cherishing conversation over banquets, he turned down life's volume so quieter joys could sing. Think of how unplugging from social media can make a walk feel vivid, or how fasting sharpens the taste of a single bite. His real innovation wasn't rejecting pleasure, but recalibrating our sensitivity to it. Yet his most urgent lesson was about friendship, the one desire he called immortal, while all others were mortal. In an age of curated Instagram feeds and transactional networking, Epicurus would have raised an eyebrow at our loneliness epidemic. His commune, the garden, was a laboratory for human connection, proving happiness thrives where people feel safe to be vulnerable. Modern studies on social bonds and longevity. They're just footnotes to his central thesis that the right companions are better armor against suffering than any fortune. So next time you mute notifications to watch a sunset, or choose a potluck with friends over a 5th star on a restaurant review, you're not just being trendy, you're walking a path paved by a philosopher who knew that the best pleasures don't come from grabbing more, but from needing less. While Epicurus sought happiness by pruning desire, the Stoics took a different path, one that didn't avoid storms but taught you how to stand firm in them. Picture a ship's captain in ancient Greece, unable to control the winds but absolutely in command of adjusting the sails. That's the core of Stoicism, not indifference to life's chaos, but the unshakable belief that while we can't always choose what happens to us, we always choose how we respond. This wasn't just philosophy, it was mental armor designed by thinkers like Epictetus, a former slave who argued that true freedom comes from mastering your perceptions, not your circumstances. Fast forward to today, and you'll find Stoic principles powering some of the most effective tools in modern psychology. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, the gold standard for treating anxiety and depression, is essentially Stoicism repackaged with clinical studies. Both teach that emotions aren't direct reactions to events, but to our thoughts about those events. When your boss criticizes you, it's not their words that cause distress, it's your internal narrative. I'm a failure that stings. Stoics called this the discipline of assent, the practice of pausing before buying into destructive interpretations. Now therapists call it cognitive restructuring, but the goal is identical: to question automatic thoughts like "this is terrible" and replace them with "this is inconvenient, but I can handle it." The Stoics also invented what we'd now call the circle of control, a mental model separating what's within our power, our efforts, our attitudes, from what isn't, other people's opinions, traffic jams, the weather. Modern self-help gurus repackage this as focus on what you can change, but Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who scribbled Stoic meditations between battles, put it more vividly: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. It's why Navy SEAL train with Stoic principles to endure hellish conditions, and why Silicon Valley CEOs use Stoic journals to navigate high-stakes decisions. Yet Stoicism's real brilliance lies in its preemptive strikes against suffering. Take negative visualization, practicing gratitude by imagining losing what you cherish. Seneca wrote, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." Today, science confirms that mentally rehearsing challenges, a technique called stress inoculation, reduces their emotional impact. It's why astronauts visualize emergencies before launch, and why athletes run through worst-case scenarios before big games. But here's where Stoicism transcends mere coping mechanisms. It reframes adversity as fuel. When the Stoic farmer Musonius Rufus was exiled to a barren island, he didn't lament, he planted gardens, calling it an opportunity to practice philosophy. That same alchemy turns modern setbacks into comebacks. The entrepreneur whose startup fails isn't ruined, they're liberated to rebuild wiser. The athlete with a career-ending injury pivots to coaching, discovering talents they'd never have explored otherwise. Stoicism doesn't numb pain, it transforms it into a whetstone for the mind. In an era of outrage algorithms and perpetual notifications, Stoicism offers a radical alternative: the ability to engage deeply with the world while remaining undisturbed by its noise. It's not about suppressing emotions, but discerning which are worth your energy, a skill as vital now as it was on the battlefields of ancient Rome. The next time you feel overwhelmed, ask the Stoic question: is this within my control? If not, redirect that effort toward what is. That simple pivot might be the most powerful tool you ever wield. Diogenes of Sinope carried a lamp in broad daylight, searching Athens for an honest man, but what he really illuminated was the absurdity of chasing status and stuff. This ancient philosopher, who famously lived in a barrel and told Alexander the Great to step aside because he was blocking the sun, didn't just reject wealth. He staged a one-man rebellion against the entire idea that happiness depends on external rewards. While the Stoics preached inner resilience and Epicurus refined pleasure, Diogenes went further. He hacked away every societal expectation until only raw, unfiltered human freedom remained. His philosophy wasn't just about owning less, it was about proving that most of what we call needs are inventions, chains we polish and call luxuries. Today, his spirit thrives in movements that challenge mindless consumption. Modern minimalists paring down to 100 possessions, they're echoing Diogenes' barrel. Climate activists rejecting fast fashion, they're channeling his disdain for wasteful excess. Even the tiny house movement, with its emphasis on living small to live fully, owes a debt to his radical simplicity. But here's where Diogenes outshines his modern counterparts. He didn't just avoid materialism, he flaunted his freedom from it. When a wealthy man mocked his humble dwelling, Diogenes shot back, "Stand closer, your house is blocking my sunlight." That wasn't just wit, it was a masterclass in redefining value. The cynic's real genius lay in exposing social norms as theater. He ate in the marketplace, a taboo in his time, urinated on politicians who insulted him, and masturbated in public to prove how arbitrary morality could be. Shock value aside, his antics were performance art designed to provoke a single question: why do we obey rules that don't serve us? Fast forward to the 21st century, and you'll see his fingerprints on every counterculture that refuses to play the game. From punk rock's rejection of mainstream success to digital nomads trading careers for experiences. Even memes mocking hustle culture or viral tweets like "quit your job, eat bugs" carry a faint whiff of Diogenes' subversive humor. Yet his most enduring insight wasn't about rejecting society, it was about reclaiming autonomy. When Plato defined humans as featherless bipeds, Diogenes plucked a chicken and tossed it into the philosopher's academy, declaring, "Behold, a man." The message, definitions, and by extension, social labels are cages. Today, that same defiance fuels movements rejecting rigid identities, from gender fluidity to anti-careerism. The modern urge to opt out of toxic systems, whether it's quiet quitting or cottagecore escapism, is pure cynicism updated for the digital age. But here's the twist: Diogenes wasn't just a rebel without a cause. His austerity had a purpose: to test his own limits and prove happiness could flourish without conditions. When he drank from his hands instead of a cup, then smashed the cup upon realizing even that was a dependency, he wasn't preaching misery, he was practicing radical self-sufficiency. In an era of doom-scrolling and lifestyle inflation, that experiment feels painfully relevant. What if the next trending purchase isn't lifting your joy but lowering your baseline? What if freedom isn't having more options but needing fewer? The cynic's ultimate lesson wasn't to live in a barrel, it was to recognize how many barrels we've built for ourselves without questioning why. Every time you mute an ad, ignore a status symbol, or laugh at consumerist hype, you're not just being frugal, you're continuing a 2,000-year-old experiment in what happens when we stop chasing shadows and start living by daylight. Pirho of Illes boarded ships with Alexander the Great's army, traveling farther than any Greek philosopher before him, but his most revolutionary journey wasn't across mountains or rivers. It was into the dizzying realization that nothing can be known for certain. While others built systems of belief, Pirho did the opposite. He systematically dismantled them, arguing that every claim from the existence of gods to the color of the sky was equally uncertain. This wasn't nihilism, it was a radical form of intellectual hygiene. He taught his followers to suspend judgment entirely, responding to all propositions with the same phrase: "It no more is than it is not." Imagine standing at the edge of an argument, any argument, and instead of picking sides, simply saying, "We can't be sure." At first glance, this seems like paralysis. What use is a philosophy that refuses conclusions? But Pirho's skepticism was a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. By exposing how easily our senses and reasoning deceive us, how a stick appears bent in water, how customs vary violently between cultures, he revealed something startling: certainty is often just confidence in disguise. Fast forward to the scientific revolution, and you'll see his fingerprints on every lab bench. The entire empirical method rests on Pirho's foundation, the humble admission that we might be wrong. When a scientist runs a control group or double-checks results against bias, they're enacting his suspension of judgment. Peer review, that's institutionalized skepticism, ensuring no claim gets a free pass. Even the phrase "more research is needed" carries his torch not as evasion but as rigor. Modern technology takes his principles further than he could have imagined. Machine learning algorithms don't assume they've found patterns, they assign probability scores, constantly updating as new data arrives. Medical diagnoses come with confidence intervals, not absolute guarantees. The smartest systems in the world now default to Pirhonian caution, hedging every output with uncertainty metrics. There's profound irony here. At the heart of our most advanced tools lies an ancient Greek's admission of ignorance. Yet Pirho's greatest legacy might be in everyday thinking. Ever played devil's advocate in a meeting? That's his move. Read the terms and conditions before clicking agree. That's skepticism in action. Even the simple act of fact-checking a viral headline honors his insight. That truth isn't something you possess, but something you continually test. In an age drowning in misinformation, where algorithms reward snap judgments and viral certitude, Pirho's restraint feels less like philosophy and more like survival skills. The next time someone declares an absolute, "This is the only way," or "Science is settled," remember the man who carried no answers, only questions, and in doing so, gave us the tools to navigate a world that's always more complicated than it seems. Aristippus didn't just enjoy pleasure, he turned it into a philosophy with the urgency of a man trying to drink from a waterfall. While Epicurus preached moderation and the Stoics championed self-control, this student of Socrates argued that immediate sensory joy was the only true compass for life. Picture him lounging at banquets, savoring fine wines and famously quipping, "I possess, but I am not possessed," as if pleasure were a dance to be enjoyed without clinging to the partner. His hedonism wasn't about recklessness, it was about mastery, the ability to immerse in delight without becoming its slave. Yet this same philosophy, when stripped of its nuance, would later be used to justify everything from Roman excess to modern-day YOLO culture. So where's the line between wisdom and indulgence? Modern psychology offers a surprising answer: balance. Today's research on affective forecasting reveals how terrible we are at predicting what will truly make us happy. That third slice of cake, the impulse buy, they promise joy but often deliver regret. A lesson Aristippus might have learned the hard way. Enter hedonic adaptation, the phenomenon where new pleasures quickly become baseline expectations. That dream car thrills for a month, then just becomes your car. Psychologists now advocate for varied and intermittent pleasures, essentially updating Aristippus' philosophy with a dosing schedule. It's why a weekend getaway feels more rewarding than a perpetual vacation, or why savoring a single square of dark chocolate outshines mindlessly devouring a whole bar. Lifestyle movements have taken this even further. The slow living trend, with its emphasis on mindful enjoyment, sipping tea without screens, turning meals into rituals, is hedonism refined for the attention economy. Even the tech world is borrowing from Aristippus with apps that encourage micro-joys, a 2-minute breathing exercise, a midday dance break. These aren't rejections of pleasure, but recalibrations, ways to stretch fleeting moments into sustained satisfaction. Yet the sharpest contrast lies in how we define good pleasures. Aristippus prized physical and immediate delights, but modern hedonists often chase more abstract highs, flow states from creative work, the helper's high from altruism, even the bittersweet joy of nostalgia. Neuroscience backs this up. The brain often rewards giving as much as receiving, and deep focus can trigger dopamine surges rivaling any feast. The twist: Aristippus might have approved. His real legacy wasn't decadence, but the radical idea that joy deserves intellectual attention. In a world that oscillates between guilt and excess, his question lingers: if not for happiness, what else should life be for? Pythagoras didn't just give us a formula for triangles, he handed humanity a cosmic skeleton key. To him, numbers weren't mere tools for counting. They were living forces, divine patterns woven into the fabric of reality. When he famously declared, "All things are number," he wasn't speaking metaphorically. Imagine standing with him on a moonlit shore, listening as he traced connections between musical harmonies, planetary orbits, and the very architecture of existence. His theorem about right-angled triangles was just one ripple in a vast numerical ocean he believed governed everything from the spirals of seashells to the motion of stars. This mystical vision birthed an entire cosmology. Pythagoras' followers discovered that plucking a string at precise fractional lengths produced perfect musical intervals, the same ratios that reappeared in their astronomical models. They charted the harmony of the spheres, theorizing planets moved in celestial concert, their orbits mirroring musical scales. While modern astronomy replaced this poetic model with gravity's equations, the echo lingers. Kepler spent years trying to fit planetary motions into Pythagorean musical ratios before uncovering his elliptical orbits, proving even wrong ideas can lead to truth. The real shock: modern science keeps stumbling upon his intuition. The Fibonacci sequence, a numerical pattern found in sunflower seeds and galaxy arms, obeys ratios Pythagoras would have recognized. Quantum physicists now describe subatomic particles as vibrational frequencies, eerily mirroring his belief that numbers underpin material reality. Even string theory's proposition that the universe's fundamental building blocks are tiny, vibrating filaments feels like Pythagorean mysticism upgraded with particle accelerators. Yet his legacy isn't confined to laboratories. Every time a musician tunes a guitar to perfect fifths or a designer employs the golden ratio for visual harmony, they're invoking his principle that beauty is mathematically structured. The digital age runs on his faith in numerical order, binary code being the ultimate reduction of reality to ones and zeros. But here's the twist: Pythagoras also birthed numerology's murkier cousin. His belief in numbers as cosmic signatures morphed into everything from biblical gematria to modern-day angel numbers. While science distilled his rigor, mysticism kept his wonder, a duality proving even the sharpest minds can cast long, ambiguous shadows. So next time you plug numbers into his theorem, remember, you're not just solving for X, you're touching a 2,000-year-old conviction that the universe speaks in equations, and we're only beginning to decipher its vocabulary. Heraclitus stood by the river and saw more than water. He saw the universe revealing its deepest secret. No man ever steps in the same river twice, he declared, not just because the water flows, but because the man changes too. This wasn't poetry, it was a seismic shift in thought. While others searched for permanence, eternal forms, or unchanging atoms, Heraclitus saw fire as the ultimate metaphor, consuming, transforming, never static. His doctrine of flux wasn't about chaos, it was about recognizing patterns within change, like the rhythmic flicker of flames that appear steady from afar but never hold the same shape twice. Fast forward to modern physics, and his vision feels prophetic. Entropy, the irreversible tendency toward disorder, echoes Heraclitus' insistence that everything decays and renews. Even quantum fields, the building blocks of reality, vibrate with perpetual energy, never truly at rest. Biologists now describe our bodies as temporary constellations of cells, entirely replaced every 7 years. Your childhood home might still stand, but the atoms composing it have cycled through countless configurations. The river never stops flowing. Business leaders have turned Heraclitus' insight into survival strategy. Kodak's downfall, clinging to film while the world went digital, stands as a cautionary tale against resisting flux. Meanwhile, companies like Netflix thrive by treating change as oxygen, pivoting from DVD rentals to streaming to original content without nostalgia for what worked yesterday. Agile methodologies enshrine his philosophy, replacing rigid 5-year plans with iterative adaptation, the most sought-after skill in the job market. Not coding or accounting, but learnability, the ability to shed outdated knowledge like skin. Yet here's where Heraclitus outshines modern gurus. He didn't just observe change, he revered it. Where we see disruption, he saw logos, a hidden order governing the dance of opposites. Day needs night, war begets peace, and stability emerges from constant motion, like a spinning top that only stands upright while moving. Psychologists now recognize this principle in resilience studies. Trauma survivors often grow stronger at broken places, and forests need occasional fires to replenish. The real test of his philosophy isn't in theories, but in our palms. Your smartphone, obsolete the moment you unbox it, is a Heraclitean object. Social media platforms rise and fall like waves. Even childhood, once a slow unfurling, now accelerates under TikTok scroll. To navigate this world, we don't need more anchors, we need to learn to swim in the current. Heraclitus would have scoffed at life hacks promising stability, offering instead a fiercer wisdom. You don't conquer the river, you become the flow. While Heraclitus saw the world as an ever-changing fire, Parmenides of Elea gazed at existence and saw something startlingly opposite, a reality so still and unchanging that movement itself was an illusion. Imagine standing before a marble statue, convinced it's alive because shadows flicker across its face, only to realize the light is moving, not the stone. That's the heart of Parmenides' vision. What we perceive as change is just our limited senses playing tricks on us. In his cryptic poem, he declared, "What is, is. What is not, is not. No becoming, no destruction, just eternal, undivided being." If Heraclitus was the philosopher of flux, Parmenides was the prophet of perfect stillness. This might sound like abstract wordplay, but his ideas sparked debates that still rage in physics labs today. Parmenides argued that empty space, nothingness, couldn't exist because nothing is, by definition, not real. Therefore, the universe must be a solid, unchanging plenum. Fast forward to quantum mechanics, where scientists grapple with vacuum fluctuations, seemingly empty space boiling with virtual particles. The paradox: Parmenides was wrong about stasis, but his intuition that nothing is unstable now underpins modern cosmology. Even Einstein's spacetime, where the universe is a static four-dimensional block where past, present, and future equally exist, owes a debt to elitic thought. Yet Parmenides' real bombshell was his assault on human perception. When we see a leaf wither or a child grow, he'd say we're witnessing mere appearances like shadows on Plato's cave wall. True reality, he insisted, is timeless and unshakable. Modern neuroscience oddly echoes this. What we experience as now is actually the brain's reconstruction of events milliseconds after they occur. Our sense of time's flow might be just as illusory as Parmenides claimed. The tension between his static reality and Heraclitus' endless flux birthed Western philosophy's central dialectic. Plato tried reconciling them with his world of eternal forms and imperfect copies. Atomists like Democritus split the difference, imagining immutable particles moving through void. Today, this duality lives on in debates about consciousness. Is the self a stable essence or a constantly rewritten narrative? Even digital culture wrestles with Parmenides. Your online profile presents a seemingly permanent identity, while algorithms ensure your feed never stops churning. Perhaps Parmenides' greatest gift was forcing us to question the most basic assumption, that what we see is real. In an age of deepfakes and alternate realities, that lesson feels less like ancient speculation and more like survival strategy. The next time you watch a sunset, consider this: the colors shifting aren't the sky changing, it's the earth turning. The difference is subtle, but like Parmenides knew, revolutions often hide in plain sight. Democritus of Abdera stared at a loaf of bread and saw what no one else could: a seething dance of invisible, indivisible particles. While his contemporaries debated water, fire, or earth as the fundamental element, this laughing philosopher, they called him the mocker for his sharp wit, proposed something radical: that everything, your hand, the air, even the gods, was built from tiny, indestructible units moving through void. He called them atomos, meaning uncuttable, and in that single concept he planted the seed for modern physics, chemistry, and our entire material understanding of reality. What's astonishing isn't just how close he got: his atoms lacked protons and quantum spin, but the core idea of microscopic building blocks was shockingly prescient. But how his theory transcended science. Democritus argued that if even consciousness arises from atomic interactions, then there's no afterlife, no immortal soul, just particles rearranging. This wasn't just proto-chemistry, it was the birth of philosophical materialism, the view that reality is fundamentally physical. Fast forward to today, and you'll find his fingerprints on everything from neuroscience's hunt for the neural correlates of consciousness to Silicon Valley's obsession with uploading minds as data. Yet his genius lay in the marriage of imagination and rigor. Unlike vague notions of elements, Democritus gave atoms specific properties: hooks to bond, shapes to explain textures, smooth atoms for sweet tastes, jagged ones for sour, even postulated that light was a stream of fast-moving particles. Newton would revive this corpuscular light theory millennia later. When modern chemists draw molecular structures or physicists simulate quark interactions, they're using updated versions of his playbook: reduce complex phenomena to their simplest mechanical parts. Here's where it gets provocative. Democritus' atomism didn't just explain matter, it challenged purpose itself. If the universe is just atoms colliding in void, where's the room for divine design? His famous analogy, the cosmic vortex where atoms combine randomly, like letters tossed into the air forming words by chance, anticipated Darwinian natural selection by 2,000 years. Richard Dawkins' blind watchmaker argument, pure Democritus with better PR, but his legacy isn't just in labs or atheist pamphlets. Every time you shuffle a deck and get a royal flush, you're witnessing atomic randomness. When 3D printers layer polymers into tools, they're proving his belief that structure determines function. Even blockchain technology, with its immutable chains of data blocks, mirrors his vision of indestructible units linked in fixed sequences. Yet for all his foresight, Democritus missed one crucial thing: the weirdness. Quantum mechanics would later reveal that atoms can be split, that particles teleport through barriers, that observing them changes their behavior. He'd likely laugh at the irony. His hard mechanical universe turned out to be far stranger than he imagined. But that's the mark of a great thinker, not being right forever, but asking the right questions first. In a world still torn between spiritualism and scientism, his quiet insistence that nothing exists except atoms and void remains the ultimate thought experiment. If we're just stardust rearranging itself, what does that make us? Protagoras wandered through ancient Athens with a bombshell of an idea that truth wasn't etched into the cosmos by gods or philosophers, but shaped by human perception itself. Man is the measure of all things, he declared, of what is that it is, and of what is not that it is not. In one stroke, he shattered the notion of universal truths, suggesting that your reality might differ radically from your neighbor's, and neither could claim superiority. This wasn't just philosophy, it was the birth of relativism, a concept that would ripple through centuries, resurfacing in postmodern art galleries, anthropology textbooks, and today's viral debates over alternative facts. The sophists, itinerant teachers like Protagoras, turned this insight into a practical tool. They taught Athenians how to argue either side of a case with equal persuasiveness, not because they lacked morals, but because they saw truth as contextual, dependent on culture, circumstance, and perspective. Fast forward to the 20th century, and you'll find their legacy in postmodern thinkers like Foucault and Derrida, who questioned whether any narrative, historical, scientific, or political, could claim absolute authority. Modern cultural relativism, the idea that practices must be understood within their own societal frameworks rather than judged by outsiders, carries the same DNA. When anthropologists document a ritual that seems bizarre to Western eyes, then explain its internal logic, they're applying Protagoras' lens. Yet this philosophy's real power and peril lies in its confrontation with authority. When a sophist argued that laws weren't divine commands but human conventions, they laid groundwork for social contract theory and even civil disobedience. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail, which called unjust laws no laws at all, channels this same insistence that morality isn't handed down, it's negotiated. But there's a darker echo too. The same relativism that protects indigenous knowledge from colonial dismissal also fuels modern conspiracy theories where personal conviction, my truth, bulldozes shared evidence. Science, ironically, has both refuted and refined Protagoras' claim. Quantum physics acknowledges that observers influence measurements. Light behaves as a wave or particle depending on how you ask, yet insists on rigorous protocols to minimize bias. Meanwhile, cognitive psychology confirms that we all construct slightly different realities based on upbringing and biology. The same snowfall delights a child, inconveniences a commuter, and signals profit to a ski resort owner. The sophists would have nodded knowingly. Today's battles over misinformation and media literacy test Protagoras' premise like never before. Is truth entirely malleable, or are there guardrails? Can democracy survive if man is the measure, extends to climate denial or vaccine skepticism? The ancient sophists didn't solve this puzzle, but they gave us the tools to grapple with it, not by dismissing opposing views but by probing their roots. The next time you encounter an unfathomable opinion, instead of shouting it down, ask, what measure of the world made this seem true? That question might be the most sophist and most necessary skill of our age. Anaximander stood at the edge of the known world and imagined something no one else dared, an origin without limits, a beginning without form. While his contemporaries traced existence back to water or fire, this radical thinker proposed the aperon, the boundless, an infinite, eternal substance that defied definition. It wasn't earth, air, or any tangible element. It was the raw potential from which all opposites, hot and cold, wet and dry, emerged and dissolved like waves in an endless ocean. In one audacious leap, Anaximander shattered the idea that reality needed a familiar starting point, suggesting instead that the universe thrived on perpetual imbalance, a cosmic dance of creation and destruction with no final curtain. Centuries later, his intuition echoes in the most cutting-edge theories of cosmology. Modern physics grapples with the same paradox. If the Big Bang birthed our universe, what existed before? The concept of quantum foam, a seething, unpredictable substrate where particles flicker in and out of existence, mirrors Anaximander's aperon as a generative chaos. Even the multiverse hypothesis, with its infinite branching realities, carries his signature, a reality too vast to be contained by any single framework. When astronomers map dark matter's invisible web or theorize about the universe's infinite expansion, they're walking paths first sketched by a philosopher who had no telescope, only his boundless imagination. But Anaximander's genius wasn't just in scale, it was in structure. He envisioned the aperon as self-regulating, enforcing justice dike by ensuring no element dominated forever. Summer gives way to winter, dominance to submission in an eternal cycle of rebalance. Today, ecologists see this principle in predator-prey dynamics, economists in market corrections, and climate scientists in feedback loops that temper or amplify change. His vision of a universe governed by dynamic equilibrium predates systems theory by millennia. The aperon's shadow stretches into abstract realms too. Mathematicians wrestling with infinity, whether in Cantor's hierarchies of infinite sets or fractal geometry's endless patterns, are probing the same ungraspable immensity Anaximander named. Even our digital age reflects his insight. The internet, with its boundless information and emergent order, behaves less like a library and more like a living aperon, constantly generating and dissolving connections without central control. Yet his boldest contribution might be humility. By admitting the primordial reality was unknowable, Anaximander carved out space for mystery at the heart of inquiry. In an era obsessed with answers, his embrace of the unanswerable feels like a whispered reminder. Some horizons exist to stretch our minds, not to be reached. The next time you stare at the night sky, remember, you're not just looking at stars, but at the same boundless question that haunted a thinker 2,600 years ago, endlessly unfolding. Thales of Miletus waded into the shallow waters off the Greek coast and saw something extraordinary, not just a liquid, but the blueprint of existence itself. While his peers attributed creation to gods or mythic battles, this pioneering thinker made a staggering claim. Water was the arche, the primal substance from which all things emerged. Not as metaphor, but as literal reality, Earth floated on water like a log. Earthquakes resulted from waves in this cosmic ocean, and even life itself sprang from its fertile depths. His reasoning was deceptively simple. Water could exist as solid, liquid, and vapor. It sustained every known organism. It carved landscapes over time. In essence, water was nature's ultimate shapeshifter, the common denominator linking seemingly disconnected phenomena. This wasn't primitive guesswork, it was the first known attempt at a unified theory of reality. Modern physicists chasing a theory of everything to reconcile quantum mechanics and gravity are continuing Thales' quest for a single explanatory principle. String theorists hypothesizing vibrating filaments as the universe's building blocks or cosmologists modeling the quantum vacuum share his core conviction. Beneath apparent complexity lies elegant simplicity. Even the search for extraterrestrial life follows his logic. NASA mantra, "Follow the water," mirrors Thales' insistence that where there's water, there's potential for existence. Yet Thales' intuition went beyond chemistry. His water symbolized transformation, the way realities condense, evaporate, and reconfigure without losing essence. Modern embryology oddly vindicates this. Human fetuses recapitulate aquatic evolutionary stages in the womb, our cells still bathed in saline reminiscent of primordial seas. Climate scientists tracking Earth's water cycle, where molecules that once quenched dinosaurs now fill your morning coffee, illustrate his vision of an endlessly recycling cosmos. Even the internet, with its fluid networks and data streams, evokes his worldview, information behaving like a digital ocean, shaping virtual landscapes as water sculpts stone. The real brilliance of his idea wasn't getting the what right, but the how. Thales didn't invoke miracles to explain nature, he observed patterns and extrapolated boldly. When he predicted a solar eclipse by recognizing celestial cycles, he proved the power of his method. The universe operates by discernible rules, not capricious gods. That shift from supernatural to natural explanations marked the birth of scientific thinking itself. Today, as physicists probe dark matter's mysteries or biologists trace life's origins to hydrothermal vents, they're honoring Thales' legacy. Not because water literally underpins reality, but because his approach seeking unity in diversity, order in chaos, remains science's North Star. The next time you watch rain patter against glass, remember, you're witnessing not just weather, but the very question that launched 2,500 years of inquiry: what makes everything flow? Zeno of Elea crafted riddles that froze motion into impossibility, proving with logic what eyes saw as false, that a swift runner could never catch a tortoise, that an arrow in flight was paradoxically at rest. His paradoxes weren't mathematical errors but landmines planted beneath our assumptions about space and time. Take Achilles and the tortoise. If the tortoise gets a head start, Achilles must first reach the point where the tortoise began, by which time the tortoise has crept forward. Repeat this process infinitely, and the mighty warrior forever trails the slowpoke. Zeno's genius was exposing infinity's haunting presence in the mundane, how every journey contains an endless series of halfway points, making movement seem absurd. For centuries, these puzzles defied resolution until calculus unveiled the secret. Infinite series can converge to finite sums. Imagine slicing a cake into ever smaller pieces, halves, quarters, eighths, ad infinitum. Though the slices grow countless, they never exceed the original cake. Similarly, Achilles' infinite steps sum to a finite distance, allowing him to overtake the tortoise in real time. Newton and Leibniz's calculus didn't just solve Zeno. It revealed that infinity isn't a barrier but a tool woven into the fabric of change itself. Modern physics extends this insight. Quantum spacetime may be pixelated at the Planck scale, suggesting motion isn't infinitely divisible but occurs in tiny, discrete jumps, an atomic reboot of Zeno's dilemma. Yet the paradox's philosophical sting lingers. If time is composed of instants, as Zeno claimed, how does flow emerge from frozen moments? Cinematic motion provides a clue. Individual frames blur into continuity when played rapidly, just as our brains stitch discrete sensory inputs into seamless experience. Relativity further complicates the picture. Time's pace varies with gravity and velocity, proving it's not the universal constant Zeno assumed. Even digital technologies echo his concerns. When lag disrupts a video call or a buffering wheel halts a stream, we confront the fragile illusion of continuity in a granular universe. Beyond mathematics, Zeno's legacy challenges our trust in perception. The arrow paradox, where a flying arrow occupies a single space at each instant, seeming motionless mirrors modern frame-by-frame analysis of movement. High-speed cameras capture hummingbird wings suspended mid-flap, confirming that motion is a sequence of stillnesses. This tension between static frames and dynamic reality underpins animations, AI-generated videos, even debates about free will. Are we continuous cells or a chain of discrete neural states? Zeno's true lesson wasn't that motion is impossible, but that reality resists tidy categories. His paradoxes force us to straddle the abstract and the tangible, where logic and experience collide. Next time your GPS calculates arrival time by slicing your trip into infinitesimal increments, remember, you're not just navigating streets, but a 2,000-year-old riddle about the nature of change itself. Empedocles of Acrogas looked at the swirling chaos of nature and saw harmony, four primal forces locked in an eternal dance. Earth, air, fire, and water weren't just substances to him. They were cosmic actors pulled together by love and torn apart by strife in an endless cycle of creation and destruction. Imagine a world where mountains rise not by chance, but because Earth's stubborn solidity clashes with fire's upward rush, where oceans exist because water's fluid embrace tempers air's restless expansion. His vision was the first grand unified theory of matter, a blueprint that would dominate Western thought for 2,000 years. Alchemists became Empedocles' most devoted disciples, though they twisted his elegance into mystical complexity. For medieval scholars, the four elements weren't just ingredients, they were codes to crack the universe. When they sought to transmute lead into gold, they weren't merely playing with chemicals. They were rebalancing elemental essences, trying to purge baser earth and water from metal to reveal its fiery, solar perfection. Their cryptic symbols, triangles for fire up arrow, inverted triangles for water down arrow, still linger in modern chemistry as the icons for flame tests and precipitation reactions. Even the alchemist's obsession with purification mirrors Empedocles' cosmic cycles, where elements endlessly recombine under love's unifying force, but the elements' reach extended beyond labs. Medieval medicine hinged on balancing bodily humors: black bile, earth; blood, air; yellow bile, fire; phlegm, water, a direct application of Empedoclean theory. Doctors bled patients to reduce fiery blood or prescribed cooling herbs to dampen excess choler. Though we've replaced these practices with germ theory, the legacy persists. We still call spirited people fiery, or describe depression as weighed down, unconsciously echoing his elemental language. Modern astrology keeps the four elements alive as personality archetypes. Fire signs Aries, Leo, Sagittarius embody passion and impulsivity. Earth signs Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn ground themselves in practicality. This isn't just mysticism, it's a psychological shorthand Empedocles would recognize. When therapists use earth energy to describe a client's need for stability or coaches urge fiery ambition, they're recycling his framework in new vocabulary. Even the environmental movement draws from his playbook, framing ecological balance as a dance of interdependent forces: forest fires renewing soil, fire plus earth; rivers carving canyons, water plus earth; storms churning the atmosphere, air plus water. The real surprise: science never fully abandoned his quartet. The states of matter, solid earth, liquid water, gas air, plasma fire, are mapped neatly onto his system. Climate models still track heat exchange, fire, and hydrological cycles, water, while geologists study tectonic collisions, earth, and atmospheric currents, air. Empedocles' genius was recognizing that complexity emerges from simple components interacting, a principle that fuels everything from chaos theory to artificial intelligence. So the next time you feel a breeze, strike a match or sip a glass of water, remember, you're not just encountering substances, but echoes of a vision that shaped how humanity sees the cosmos. The elements may have yielded to the periodic table, but their poetry, The way they frame our world in tangible, wrestling opposites still whispers in our attempts to make sense of life's beautiful chaos. Plotinus stood at the crossroads of reason and revelation, weaving Plato's abstract forms into something far more luminous, a ladder of light ascending from the mud of matter to the blazing one, the source of all existence. Where Plato's forms were intellectual blueprints, Plotinus drenched them in divine radiance, transforming philosophy into a mystical ascent. Imagine a universe where every stone, tree, and star isn't just an imperfect copy of an ideal, but an emanation, a ripple of splendor flowing outward from the ineffable one like light from a candle, growing dimmer yet never severed from its origin. This wasn't just metaphysics, it was an invitation to ecstasy, a call to strip away illusions until the soul merged with ultimate reality like a drop returning to the ocean. The Renaissance inhaled this vision and exhaled masterpieces. When Botticelli painted the birth of Venus, he wasn't just depicting a myth, he was channeling Neoplatonic ecstasy, showing beauty's celestial descent into earthly form. Michelangelo's Pietà, with its luminous marble flesh, echoed Plotinus' belief that art could reveal the divine trapped in matter. Even the architectural harmonies of Brunelleschi's domes, calculated to mirror cosmic order, owed debts to this fusion of geometry and transcendence. Art became alchemy, transforming pigments and stone into vessels for spiritual ascent, proving Plotinus right. Beauty wasn't decoration, it was a language of the divine. Christian theologians, meanwhile, found in Plotinus a stealth ally. Augustine of Hippo, before his conversion, wrestled with Neoplatonism's allure. Its one bore striking resemblances to Yahweh, its soul's ascent mirrored the Christian journey toward salvation. By the Middle Ages, thinkers like Pseudo-Dionysius were grafting Platonian light metaphysics onto biblical texts, crafting a mystical theology where God was both unknowable and intimately present. The very concept of angelic hierarchies, pure intellects mediating between heaven and earth, reads like a Christianized version of Plotinus' emanation theory. Even today, when contemplatives speak of losing oneself in God, they're walking paths first mapped by this philosopher-mystic. Modern esotericism keeps the flame alive. Philosophies' notion of ascending planes of consciousness, Jung's collective unconscious brimming with archetypes, even the psychedelic quest to dissolve ego boundaries, all carry whispers of Neoplatonism's central thrill. That reality is more layered and luminous than our senses suggest. Silicon Valley tech gurus touting cosmic consciousness through meditation apps or physicists musing about a participatory universe. They're reviving Plotinus' conviction that the mind doesn't just observe reality, it collaborates in its creation. Yet his deepest legacy might be the insistence that philosophy isn't just about thinking, it's about transformation. When Rilke wrote, "You must change your life," or when modern mindfulness teaches detachment from chaotic thoughts, they're channeling the Neoplatonic imperative to turn inward, polish the soul's mirror, and catch glimpses of the infinite. In an age drowning in distractions, that call to awaken, to recognize the sacred woven through the mundane, has never been more urgent. The next time sunlight filters through leaves or a piece of music gives you chills, consider, what if these aren't just pleasant moments but rungs on a ladder leading back to the source of all wonder? Aristotle peered into the human soul and saw not black and white but countless shades of gray. Each virtue a delicate balance between excess and deficiency. Courage, for example, wasn't just bravery, it was the midpoint between recklessness and cowardice. Generosity wasn't mere giving, but the art of navigating between extravagance and stinginess. He called this equilibrium the golden mean, a concept that would quietly shape everything from modern psychology to corporate leadership seminars. Picture a tightrope walker adjusting their posture with micro shifts. Too far left, they topple into excess. Too far right, they plunge into deficiency. That's the dance Aristotle prescribed for moral living, a dynamic calibration most of us attempt daily without realizing it. neuroscience now confirms the wisdom of his framework. Studies on decision-making reveal that our brains constantly weigh opposing impulses, caution against risk, self-interest against altruism, seeking optimal outcomes. Behavioral economists call this satisficing, blending satisfy and suffice, where individuals aim not for perfection but for the most balanced choice given constraints. The golden mean reappears in modern conflict resolution too. Skilled mediators don't push for total victory but help parties find the middle ground where both feel heard without surrendering core values. Even parenting manuals urging authoritative over authoritarian or permissive styles echo Aristotle's insistence that effective guidance avoids extremes. Corporate training programs have covertly adopted his ancient playbook. Emotional intelligence coaching teaches managers to balance empathy and assertiveness, avoiding the pitfalls of micromanagement on one end and laissez-faire neglect on the other. Google's Project Oxygen, which identified traits of high-performing leaders, found the best ones blended confidence with humility, direction with flexibility, essentially proving Aristotle right with pie charts and salary data. The tech giant's findings could have been lifted straight from Nicomachean ethics. Excellence isn't about swinging between extremes but finding the sweet spot where opposing qualities temper each other. Yet the mean isn't mathematical mediocrity, it's context-sensitive artistry. A firefighter rushing into flames displays extreme courage by everyday standards, but in their profession, it's the appropriate midpoint between desertion and foolish overexposure. Modern virtue ethicists highlight this nuance. What's moderate for a soldier may be reckless for an accountant. This relativistic edge makes Aristotle's system remarkably adaptable, whether applied to debates on social media etiquette between cancel culture and toxic tolerance, or sustainable consumption between hoarding and extreme minimalism. The real test of the golden mean lies in its tension with modern hustle culture. Aristotle would have raised an eyebrow at burnout badges of honor or the glorification of relentless productivity. His framework suggests that true success, whether in careers or relationships, isn't about pushing limits indefinitely, but discerning when enough effort achieves excellence without eroding health or integrity. Next time you're torn between two opposing choices, ask not which is right, but where the balance point lies. That shift in perspective might be the most Aristotelian and practical skill you ever cultivate. Plato's allegory of the cave doesn't just describe ancient prisoners chained in darkness, it holds up a mirror to our modern world, where flickering shadows still dictate reality for far too many. Picture those prisoners shackled since birth, their eyes fixed on a wall where shadows dance, shadows cast by puppeteers manipulating objects behind them. To the captives, these shadows are reality. Now replace the cave with the glow of smartphone screens, the puppeteers with algorithm-curated content, and the shadows with viral headlines and influencer narratives. The allegory stops feeling ancient and starts feeling uncomfortably familiar. Education systems often unwittingly reinforce these chains. Standardized testing and rigid curricula can train students to regurgitate shadows, prepackaged answers rather than turn toward the light of critical questioning. When schools prioritize memorization over inquiry, they're essentially teaching kids to admire the cave wall. Finland's education model offers a counterpoint. By emphasizing problem-solving and student-led exploration, it encourages learners to question the shadows and seek first-hand understanding. The difference is stark. One system produces skilled test-takers, the other cultivates truth-seekers. Media literacy exposes the puppeteers behind today's digital shadows. The rise of deepfakes, echo chambers, and sensationalized news mirrors Plato's warning. When we don't know who's shaping the images before us, we risk mistaking distortion for truth. Fact-checking organizations act as modern guides, leading people out of the cave by teaching them to trace information back to its source. But the deeper challenge lies in recognizing our own complacency. How often do we scroll through feeds, mistaking curated snippets for the full spectrum of reality? Societal conditioning adds another layer of chains. Cultural norms, advertising, and political rhetoric cast their own shadows, shaping perceptions of success, beauty, and even morality. The body positivity movement, for instance, fights one set of cave shadows by challenging narrow beauty standards projected by fashion and media industries. Similarly, grassroots activism often serves as a collective awakening, a moment when marginalized groups drag oppressive narratives into the light and demand others see them for the illusions they are. Yet Plato's allegory isn't just a critique, it's a roadmap. The freed prisoner's journey from painful disorientation in the sunlight to eventual clarity mirrors the discomfort of unlearning biases or confronting inconvenient truths. Growth begins when we stop passively consuming shadows and start interrogating the systems that cast them. Every time you cross-check a dubious claim, question a long-held assumption, or seek out primary sources, you're taking a step toward the cave's mouth. And as Plato knew, enlightenment isn't a solo endeavor, it's a duty. Those who have seen the light must return to the cave, not as conquerors, but as witnesses. The next time you share a fact-checked article or challenge a harmful stereotype, you're not just speaking up, you're holding a torch in the dark. Aristotle didn't just ask what things are, he dug deeper, demanding to know why they exist at all. His answer: 4 interwoven causes that explain everything from acorns to ziggurats, a framework so robust it quietly undergirds modern science and creativity. Start with the material cause, the stuff something's made of. A marble statue's material cause isn't its beauty, but the raw quarry stone. Fast forward to today, and material science engineers obsess over this very question, swapping marble for carbon fiber or graphene, seeking materials whose properties align with intended functions. When Tesla opts for aluminum alloy in car frames to balance strength and weight, or medical researchers craft biodegradable stents from polylactic acid, they're channeling Aristotle's first cause, the right substance for the right purpose. Then comes the formal cause, the blueprint, the essence that makes a thing what it is. A lump of clay becomes a vase not just by shaping, but by embodying the idea of vaseness. Modern software development mirrors this perfectly. Code isn't just typed commands, it's the encapsulation of logical structures and algorithms. Object-oriented programming, where classes define objects, forms, and behaviors, is pure Aristotelian formalism translated into silicon. Even 3D printing relies on this principle. A digital model, formal cause, dictates how layers of material accumulate into a functional whole. Biologists, too, grapple with formal causes when studying DNA, the molecular schema that shapes proteins into eyes, wings, or leaves. Efficient cause, the spark that sets creation in motion, might be Aristotle's most intuitive concept. The sculptor's chisels striking marble, the programmer's keystrokes writing code, the enzyme triggering a metabolic reaction, all are efficient causes. But modern applications reveal subtler layers. In systems theory, efficient causes become feedback loops and triggers. A thermostat doesn't just react to temperature changes but anticipates them, adjusting outputs based on inputs. Robotics engineers designing autonomous drones must account for cascading efficient causes. Sensor data cause prompts algorithmic decisions effect, which in turn alter flight paths, new cause. Even social media algorithms operate as efficient causes, where user clicks cause reshape content feeds effect, which then influence future clicks, a recursive dance Aristotle might have admired. Yet it's the final cause, the telos or purpose, that feels most radical today. Aristotle argued everything strives toward an end. Acorns aim to be oaks, hearts aim to pump blood. Teleology got sidelined in the scientific revolution. Newton's physics needs no purposes, but it's staging a comeback. In biomedicine, researchers study cellular behaviors not just by mechanistic processes, but by their functional goals. Why does a stem cell choose to become a neuron rather than a skin cell? Design thinking, too, embraces final causes by starting with user needs. Apple's products succeed not because of their aluminum material or circuitry formal, but because every component serves the telos of seamless human-device interaction. The real magic lies in how these causes interact. Consider mRNA vaccines. Lipids material encapsulate genetic sequences formal, manufactured via enzymatic processes efficient, all to achieve immunity final. Or sustainable architecture. Bamboo material is shaped by parametric designs formal, assembled using robotic automation efficient to create carbon-neutral habitats final. Aristotle's quartet isn't a relic. It's a lens for reverse engineering complexity, whether in a microchip or a mangrove forest. Critics once dismissed final causes as unscientific, but AI's rise proves otherwise. When machine learning models optimize for a loss function, they're pursuing a telos. Their purpose is to minimize error. The model's layers material, architecture formal, and training data efficient all conspire toward that end. Even evolutionary algorithms which mimic natural selection rely on implicit teleology. Fitness functions guide digital evolution just as survival pressures guide biological adaptation. So next time you troubleshoot a gadget or admire a skyscraper, try seeing through Aristotle's eyes. That glitchy app, maybe its material cause server load clashes with its final cause instant response. That elegant bridge, its form follows function so precisely, the four causes blur into a single marvel of human ingenuity. The genius of this framework isn't in separating causes, but in revealing how they dance together, an ancient rhythm still orchestrating modern innovation. Diotima of Mantinea, the mysterious priestess who schooled Socrates on love's true nature, described desire not as a single flame but as a spiraling staircase, each step revealing deeper, more enduring forms of connection. Her ladder of love, recorded in Plato's Symposium, begins with the physical, the spark of attraction to a beautiful body, but doesn't stop there. Like a climber ascending from base camp to summit, the lover moves from admiring one form to recognizing beauty in all bodies, then to cherishing the elegance of minds, the harmony of institutions, and finally, the radiance of truth itself. This isn't just poetic metaphor, it's a psychological roadmap that eerily anticipates modern theories of human motivation and bonding. Maslow's hierarchy of needs mirrors Diotima's ascent in uncanny ways. Just as her ladder starts with primal desires, physical beauty, Maslow's pyramid roots itself in physiological and safety needs before blossoming into belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. Contemporary relationship science reinforces this progression. Early-stage romance floods the brain with dopamine, that giddy, body-centric high Diotima associated with the ladder's first rung. But long-term couples who cultivate intellectual intimacy and shared values activate different neural pathways, sparking the quieter, more sustaining warmth of oxytocin and vasopressin. The transition from passionate to companionate love isn't a decline, as pop culture often frames it, but an ascent, precisely what Diotima predicted when she described love maturing from slavish obsession with a single body to wonder at the vast ocean of beauty. Attachment theory offers another parallel. Secure relationships allow partners to use each other as a secure base, to explore higher pursuits, careers, creativity, spirituality, much like Diotima's lover who stops clinging to a single person and starts engaging with the world through love's lens. The avoidant partner, fixated on self-reliance, and the anxious one, trapped in possessive neediness, both stall on the ladder's lower steps. Therapists now guide such couples toward what Diotima called love's greater mysteries, interdependence that fuels growth rather than stifles it. Yet the ladder's most radical rung, the leap from human connections to transcendent truth, finds validation in unexpected places. positive psychology identifies self-transcendence as the apex of well-being, where personal concerns give way to service, wonder, and connection to something larger. Neuroscientists studying unitive experiences during meditation or awe in nature observe brain states strikingly similar to romantic love, suggesting Diotima was onto something when she linked earthly and cosmic love. Even the concept of flow, that state of timeless absorption in meaningful work, echoes her vision of love as active participation in beauty rather than passive consumption. Modern culture's obsession with swiping through potential partners based on thumbnails would have struck Diotima as tragic, not because attraction is trivial, but because it's meant to be a starting line, not a finish line. Dating apps optimized for first-rung interactions, looks, quick banter often fail to scaffold upward movement toward deeper connection. Contrast this with traditions like Japanese omiai, where partners assess compatibility through shared values and life goals from the outset, or the growing, slow love movement prioritizing emotional availability over instant chemistry. These approaches honor Diotima's insight. Lasting love requires climbing together, not just matching at ground level. The ladder's true brilliance lies in its refusal to demonize any step. Physical attraction isn't dismissed, it's the necessary foundation, but staying there, Diotima warns, is like mistaking a doorway for the palace. Her vision challenges us to ask, does this relationship amplify my humanity or shrink it? Do we admire each other's minds as much as our bodies? Do our conversations orbit gossip and grievances, or spiral upward toward ideas and ideals? In an age where algorithms feed us endless hot takes but starve us of wisdom, her ancient prescription to let love educate us toward broader, richer ways of being feels urgently modern. The next time your heart flutters, ask not just, is this person attractive, but can they help me see the world more beautifully? That's the first step onto the ladder. Anaxagoras of Clazomni peered into the swirling chaos of the cosmos and saw something remarkable, not just atoms colliding, but a luminous intelligence weaving order from disorder. He called this force nous, meaning mind, and described it as the cosmic architect that set the primordial whirl in motion, separating light from dark, earth from stars, and eventually life from dust. Unlike the gods of myth who capriciously interfered, his nous operated impersonally, not through prayers but through laws, governing the universe with flawless precision while remaining distinct from the material it shaped. This wasn't just proto-science, it was the first articulation of a governing intelligence behind nature's patterns, an idea that would ripple through centuries, resurfacing in today's fiercest debates about consciousness, artificial intelligence, and the apparent fine-tuning of physical constants. Modern cosmology unknowingly echoes Anaxagoras' intuition. When physicists speak of the anthropic principle, the observation that universal constants like gravity's strength or the mass of electrons are improbably fine-tuned to allow life, they're wrestling with his core question: is this precision accidental or evidence of some deeper ordering principle? String theorists hypothesizing a landscape of possible universes, or proponents of panspermia suggesting life's building blocks were seeded across galaxies, are offering updated takes on his vision of nous as a cosmic organizer. Even the search for extraterrestrial intelligence SETI carries his torch, scanning the heavens not just for aliens, but for signatures of mind embedded in the fabric of reality itself. Yet the real battleground for nous lies in consciousness studies. Anaxagoras proposed that mind couldn't emerge from mere matter. It had to be fundamental, a primary feature of existence. Fast forward to today, and panpsychist philosophers like David Chalmers argue similarly. What if consciousness isn't a byproduct of brain chemistry, but a basic property of the universe like mass or charge? Neuroscience grapples with this puzzle daily. When a bundle of neurons generates subjective experience, the taste of coffee, the sting of regret, is that just chemistry, or does it hint at a deeper layer of reality where mind and matter intertwine? Artificial intelligence amplifies the mystery. If news is just complex computation, could a sufficiently advanced AI awaken into genuine awareness? Or does consciousness require something more, something Anaxagoras might recognize as kin to his primordial intelligence? Intelligent design advocates have co-opted his language, framing DNA's intricate code as evidence of a cosmic programmer. But Anaxagoras' news differs crucially. It isn't a deity crafting each leaf and galaxy, but an impersonal force that set laws in motion, then let complexity unfold. This distinction matters profoundly in modern science. Evolutionary biology shows how unguided processes can create staggering complexity, yet the laws enabling this mathematics' uncanny applicability to nature, quantum mechanics' delicate balance, still provoke wonder. Einstein captured this tension perfectly. The most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. The legacy of news emerges most vividly in humanity's drive to understand itself. When neuroscientists map decision-making to neural circuits, only to find gaps where free will might reside, they're retracing Anaxagoras' boundary between mind and mechanism. Silicon Valley's quest to replicate human thought in silicon chips tests his assumption that news is sui generis, unique and irreducible. Even spirituality gets a secular rebranding in this light. Meditation apps promise to hack consciousness, while psychedelic researchers speak of ego dissolution, as if the self were a temporary eddy in news' vast stream. Perhaps Anaxagoras' greatest insight was recognizing that order implies more than chance. Whether you see that more as divine, mathematical, or emergent, his question endures: why does the universe make sense, and why are we here to notice? The next time you marvel at a sunset's colors or an equation's elegance, remember, you're not just observing nature, but participating in a 2,000-year-old conversation about the mind behind it all. Xenophanes of Colophon took one look at the gods of Olympus, petty, squabbling, all too human in their flaws, and saw something profoundly unsettling. If horses could paint, he mused, they'd depict gods as horses. Lions would fashion them in leonine glory. His point: humanity's deities weren't divine revelations, but projections, mirrors held up to our own fears and desires. This wasn't just wit, it was the first systematic critique of anthropomorphism, a lightning bolt aimed at the heart of religious dogma that still crackles through modern debates about faith, secularism, and the nature of belief itself. Fast forward to today, and you'll find his fingerprints on every secular movement that challenges religious literalism. When Richard Dawkins dismisses the God of the Bible as a tyrannical imaginary friend, he's channeling Xenophanes' core objection that gods crafted in our image inevitably inherit our worst traits. The new atheism movement's insistence that morality needn't hinge on divine command. That's a 21st century echo of Xenophanes' assertion that ethical behavior should stem from reason, not fear of celestial retaliation. Even the satirical edge of shows like The Good Place, where heaven's bureaucracy mirrors earthly ineptitude, owes a debt to his irreverent lens. But Xenophanes wasn't just tearing down old idols, he was sketching a radical alternative. His concept of a single, non-anthropomorphic deity, shaking all things by the thought of his mind, anticipates Spinoza's God as nature and Einstein's cosmic religion. Modern pantheists, secular Buddhists, and even quantum physicists who speak of the universe as a conscious, unified field are unwittingly fleshing out his vision. The irony: his critique of traditional religion didn't lead him to atheism, but to a more abstract philosophical spirituality, a path later walked by thinkers like Carl Sagan, who revered the cosmos while rejecting dogma. The real sting of his philosophy lies in its psychological insight. Cognitive science now confirms what Xenophanes guessed: humans naturally attribute agency and intention to the unknown. When lightning strikes, ancient Greeks saw Zeus' anger. Modern brains, stripped of mythology, still concoct narratives, conspiracy theories, karma. Everything happens for a reason, to impose order on chaos. Functional MRI studies show that when faced with uncertainty, our neural circuits for social cognition light up as if negotiating with an invisible other. In this light, religion isn't just doctrine, it's a byproduct of how our brains misfire in the face of randomness, yet his legacy isn't confined to skeptic circles. Progressive theologians have quietly adopted his framework, reimagining God as a metaphorical force rather than a supernatural being. When the late Bishop John Shelby Spunk argued that literalism kills the Bible's message, he was applying Xenophane's razor, separating transcendent truth from tribal superstition. Even interfaith dialogues, where participants seek common ground beyond anthropomorphic depictions, reflect his insistence that divinity transcends cultural caricatures. The tension he exposed between comforting myths and uncomfortable truths fuels today's culture wars. School boards debating evolution, politicians weaponizing religious rhetoric, artists jailed for blasphemy, all replay his ancient dilemma. How do societies progress when dogmas demand allegiance to outdated cosmologies? The answer, Xenophanes might suggest, lies in courage, not the courage to reject belief, but to continually refine it, to let go of gods made in man's image and grapple with the sublime mystery that remains. After all, if divinity exists, shouldn't it be grander than our wildest projections? That question, posed 26 centuries ago, remains the ultimate challenge to anyone who claims to know the mind of God. Gorgias of Leontini took a torch to the very foundations of knowledge with three audacious claims. Nothing exists. If it did exist, we couldn't know it, and even if we could know it, we couldn't communicate that knowledge to others. This wasn't just skepticism, it was intellectual arson, burning down the pillars of reality, perception, and language in one rhetorical blaze. While his contemporaries debated what was true, Gorgias dared to ask, what if truth itself is an illusion? His infamous treatise on non-existence reads like ancient performance art, a dizzying display of logic used to dismantle logic, leaving readers equal parts horrified and exhilarated. Fast forward to the 20th century, and you'll find his shadow looming over existentialist cafes and postmodern lecture halls. When Jean-Paul Sartre declared existence precedes essence, that life has no inherent meaning until we create it, he was walking the path Gorgias carved. The leap isn't as far as it seems. If reality is fundamentally unknowable, as Gorgias argued, then human existence becomes a blank slate, a void we must fill with our own purpose. Existentialism's angst, the vertigo of absolute freedom, is just Gorgias' nihilism with a Parisian beret and a cigarette. Postmodernism took his linguistic skepticism nuclear. Jacques Derrida's assertion that there is nothing outside the text mirrors Gorgias' third claim that communication is a flawed game of signifiers forever divorced from the truth they claim to represent. Think of a game of telephone where the original message wasn't just distorted but never existed in the first place. That's the Gorgian twist. When a politician's speech or a news headline feels like a hall of mirrors, it's not just spin, it's proof language is inherently unreliable. Advertising thrives on this instability, selling not products but carefully constructed illusions of happiness, success, or belonging. Yet Gorgias' real genius was turning nihilism into a tool. Unlike later thinkers who wallowed in despair, he wielded his skepticism like a surgeon's scalpel, slicing through dogma to reveal the malleability of persuasion. His disciples didn't retreat from public life. They dominated Athenian courts and assemblies, proving that even if objective truth is elusive, effectiveness isn't. A modern parallel, trial lawyers who know jurors decide on narrative, not facts alone, or influencers who curate realities more compelling than the raw footage of their lives. The darkest interpretation of Gorgias fuels today's post-truth landscape. When conspiracy theorists dismiss verified evidence as just another narrative, they're weaponizing his skepticism without his intellectual rigor. But there's a brighter take. If reality is constructed, we're not helpless, we're co-authors. Feminist and critical race theorists apply this insight to dismantle oppressive truths like biological determinism by exposing them as social constructs. Even climate activists leverage it, reframing the crisis from inevitable doom to a story we can rewrite with collective action. Gorgias' legacy isn't a dead end, it's a crossroads. Down one path lies paralysis. If nothing's real, why care? Down the other lies liberation. If reality's fluid, we can mold it toward justice or joy. The choice isn't his, it's ours. And that might be the most unsettling and empowering lesson of all. Aristotle's concept of teleology, the idea that everything in nature has an inherent purpose, didn't just shape ancient philosophy. It ignited a debate that still rages in laboratories and tech hubs today. Take an acorn, for instance. To Aristotle, its existence wasn't accidental. Its telos, or ultimate aim, was to become an oak tree. This wasn't poetic metaphor, it was a foundational principle that saw purpose woven into the fabric of reality itself. Fast forward to the 19th century, and Darwin's theory of natural selection seemed to upend this view entirely. Evolution, with its blind, mechanistic process of random mutation and selective pressure, appeared to erase the need for purpose. Yet the ghost of teleology never fully left the building. Modern evolutionary biology still grapples with Aristotle's shadow. While natural selection explains how traits emerge, it doesn't always satisfy our instinct to ask why. When biologists describe bird wings as designed for flight or venom as meant to subdue prey, they're slipping into teleological language, not because they've abandoned Darwin, but because purpose remains a useful shorthand for function. Even Richard Dawkins, arch-critic of divine design, coined the term the blind watchmaker to describe evolution's apparent craftsmanship, the irony. In their efforts to purge teleology, scientists often end up borrowing its vocabulary to explain complexity. The debate takes a sharper turn in the realm of artificial intelligence. When engineers program a robot to seek power or a neural network to optimize outcomes, they're implicitly assigning telos not as a metaphysical truth but as a practical framework. This creates ethical quicksand. If an autonomous drone is designed with the purpose of minimizing civilian casualties, who bears moral responsibility when it fails? Aristotle might argue the drone's purpose reflects its creator's intentions, while a materialist would counter that it's just algorithms following code. The tension between these views fuels dilemmas in AI ethics. Can machines have goals without intentions? Teleology's most provocative modern echo lies in the anthropic principle, the observation that universal constants seem eerily fine-tuned to allow life. Some physicists argue this suggests a cosmic telos, while others dismiss it as survivorship bias. We wouldn't exist to ponder these constants if they weren't just right. The divide mirrors Aristotle's ancient conflict with atomists like Democritus. Is the universe aimless matter in motion, or does it hum with implicit direction? Even our everyday language betrays teleological thinking. We say hearts pump blood rather than contract rhythmically due to electrical impulses, because purpose organizes chaos into meaning. This cognitive bias, what psychologists call intentionality overreach, shapes everything from how we interpret accidents, everything happens for a reason, to how we design education systems grading as preparation for the real world. Aristotle's framework endures not because it's scientifically airtight, but because purpose is the lens through which humans naturally navigate uncertainty. The irony, teleology's greatest legacy might be its flexibility. In medicine, viewing cancer cells as aiming to proliferate helps researchers develop targeted therapies, even though cells don't want anything. In conservation ecology, protecting a keystone species because it maintains ecosystem balance reflects a teleological worldview, one that's pragmatically effective if philosophically messy. Aristotle's telos isn't a fact to prove or disprove, but a tool, one that helps us ask better questions, even when the answers refuse to fit neatly into boxes labeled purpose or chance. So the next time you catch yourself wondering why something exists, whether it's a butterfly's wing or the code running your smartphone, remember, you're not just asking a question. You're stepping into a 2,000-year-old conversation about whether the universe is a story with meaning or a puzzle we impose meaning upon, and that conversation, it seems, is far from over. Plato's vision of the ideal ruler wasn't just a philosopher, it was a reluctant one. In the Republic, he sketched a leader dragged from the warmth of contemplation into the messy arena of governance, someone who ruled not for power or prestige, but because justice demanded it. These philosopher kings, as he called them, weren't born into privilege or elected by popularity. They were forged through decades of rigorous education, tested in ethics, mathematics, and dialectic until their very minds mirrored the harmony of the cosmos itself. To Plato, only those who'd glimpsed the eternal forms of truth and goodness could resist the corrupting pull of factionalism and greed. Strip away the ancient Greek context and you'll find a startlingly modern question. What if the most qualified, not the most charismatic or connected, actually governed? The tension between Plato's ideal and modern democracy fuels today's debates about meritocracy. Silicon Valley's obsession with data-driven leadership and expert governance echoes his faith in rule by the enlightened few. When tech CEOs argue that algorithms could allocate resources more fairly than politicians, or when think tanks advocate for panels of scientists to guide climate policy, they're channeling the philosopher king model, algorithms and expertise standing in for Plato's guardians. But the flaws are just as glaring now as they were in Athens. Who decides what merit means? Plato's answer, a fixed curriculum of virtue, rings hollow in a multicultural world where values clash. The Ivy League admissions scandal, where wealth masqueraded as merit, exposes how easily systems designed to elevate the best can be gamed by those already on top. Corporate leadership training programs unwittingly resurrect Plato's blueprint. McKinsey's rigorous case study method, Google's quest to quantify managerial excellence, even the military's emphasis on ethics in officer education, all aim to mold decision-makers whose judgment transcends self-interest. The twist: modern meritocracies often mistake technical skill for wisdom. A brilliant engineer promoted to CEO might excel at optimizing workflows but falter at moral dilemmas like balancing profits against layoffs. Plato foresaw this trap. His philosopher kings studied poetry and music not as hobbies, but to cultivate the emotional depth needed to temper cold logic. The best MBA programs now integrate humanities for this very reason, though whether a weekend seminar on Aristotle can offset quarterly earnings pressure remains an open question. Political systems grapple with the same paradox. Singapore's ruling party, which recruits bureaucrats through competitive exams and trains them in policy academies, boasts efficiency but faces criticism for stifling dissent. Meanwhile, grassroots movements like Spain's Podemos or America's Justice Democrats push for leaders of the people, arguing that lived experience trumps technocratic expertise. Plato would have recoiled at both extremes, the first for confusing administrative skill with philosophical insight, the second for romanticizing amateur governance. His ideal ruler combined the rigor of a scholar, the empathy of an artist, and the selflessness of a monk, a standard no real-world system has ever matched. The philosopher king's shadow looms largest in crises. During the pandemic, nations led by leaders with scientific backgrounds, Taiwan's Tsai Ing-wen Law, but trained in trade relations, or New Zealand's Jacinda Ardern communications, outperformed those governed by populists or career politicians. Yet when Germany's Angela Merkel, a physicist, warned of coming challenges only to be ignored by short-term focused rivals, it revealed the limits of reason in a world that often rewards spectacle over substance. Plato's nightmare, a society that chooses charming demagogues over clear-eyed stewards, plays out daily on social media, where viral moments outweigh nuanced platforms. But here's where Plato's model falters irreparably. His guardians, once in power, faced no accountability beyond their own virtue. Modern leadership theory emphasizes checks and balances, not because we distrust expertise, but because history shows absolute power corrupts even the best-intentioned. The Federalist Papers' insistence on separating powers or corporate governance's independent directors exist precisely to mitigate the risk of philosopher kings becoming tyrants. The irony is thick. Plato's solution to democracy's chaos requires a level of human perfection that democracy, for all its flaws, openly admits doesn't exist. Perhaps the real legacy of the philosopher king isn't in governance but in aspiration. It challenges us to ask, what if we expected more from leaders than charisma or party loyalty? What if voters valued humility and study over bombast and sound bites? The answers won't mirror Plato's academy, but the questions themselves raised over 2 millennia ago remain the sharpest tools we have to carve a better path forward. Lucretius didn't just write poetry, he smuggled philosophy into verse, wrapping Epicurus' radical ideas in rhythms so intoxicating they survived centuries of suppression. His epic De Rerum Natura, on the nature of things, is a 6-book masterpiece that does the impossible. It makes atomism sing, turning sterile physics into lush landscapes where swerving particles dance like wheat stalks in the wind. While Rome's elites dismissed Epicureanism as hedonism for the lazy, Lucretius weaponized beauty to prove otherwise. Picture a nobleman reclining at a feast, expecting typical odes to wine and gods, only to hear, "Nothing from nothing ever yet was born." With that opening salvo, Lucretius hijacked the tools of tradition, meter, metaphor, myth to dismantle superstition brick by brick. His mission, to free minds from fear, of death, of wrathful deities, of unexplained natural phenomena, by revealing a universe ruled not by capricious gods but by elegant, knowable laws. The poem's survival was itself a miracle. After Christianity dominated Europe, Epicureanism was nearly erased, its materialism clashing with faith, its pleasure ethic mistaken for license. But medieval monks, oblivious to its heresy, preserved De Rerum Natura for its linguistic brilliance, unknowingly safeguarding a time bomb. When Renaissance scholar Poggio Bracciolini rediscovered a copy in a German monastery in 1417, the detonation began. Suddenly, thinkers grappling with the Church's dogma had an ancient poetic alternative, a vision where lightning wasn't Jupiter's anger but colliding atoms, where the soul wasn't immortal but mortal, dissolving painlessly at death like a scattered breeze. Thomas Jefferson owned at least 5 Latin editions, calling Epicurus the greatest of ancient philosophers, and Lucretius his favorite poet. The influence whispers through Jefferson's letters, his embrace of religious freedom mirroring Epicurean skepticism of divine intervention, his pursuit of happiness clause in the Declaration echoing the original Greek's eudaimonia. But the connection runs deeper than phrasing. Lucretius' depiction of society evolving from brutishness to civilization through trial and error, not divine gift, resonated with Enlightenment faith in human progress. When Jefferson drafted laws for public education and scientific inquiry, he was channeling the poem's core tenet, knowledge liberates. The real magic lies in Lucretius' method, using art to disarm resistance. He doesn't argue against fear of death, he paints it as peaceful oblivion. Where death is, we are not. He doesn't dryly describe atomic motion. He compares it to dust motes dancing in sunlight, visible proof of invisible forces. This fusion of logic and lyricism made radical ideas palatable, a tactic modern science communicators emulate. When Carl Sagan described humans as star stuff or Neil deGrasse Tyson waxes poetic about cosmic connections, they're deploying Lucretian strategy, awakening wonder first, letting truth follow. Yet the poem's most subversive thread is its rejection of infinite desires. In a passage Jefferson heavily underlined, Lucretius warns that chasing wealth and power is like pouring water into a sieve. The more we acquire, the more we crave. True contentment comes not from external prizes but from mastering wants, a notion that challenges consumer culture today. Behavioral economists confirm Lucretius' insight: beyond basic needs, happiness plateaus regardless of income. The modern minimalism movement, with its emphasis on shedding excess to find freedom, is essentially Epicureanism repackaged for the Instagram age. Science, too, keeps vindicating this ancient text. Lucretius' speculation about microscopic seeds of matter predates the discovery of cells by 16 centuries. His description of the universe as infinite, containing countless worlds in constant flux, aligns with modern multiverse theories. Even his botanical observations, how plants grow toward light, anticipate phototropism. The poem's blend of accurate detail and bold conjecture mirrors how cutting-edge research often marries empirical rigor with imaginative leaps. What makes De Rerum Natura timeless isn't just its ideas, but its fearless joy. Lucretius stares into the void and doesn't flinch. He celebrates a universe without gods as one where humans take responsibility for their own flourishing. In an era of climate crisis and AI ethics, that message regains urgency. We can't pray our way out of problems, we must think, experiment, and cooperate. The next time you feel overwhelmed by doom-scrolling headlines, remember Lucretius' antidote. Understand nature's workings, tend your garden of simple pleasures, and face the unknown not with terror but with curiosity. After all, the atoms that made his words now dance in your eyes as you read them, proof that nothing ever truly ends, only transforms. Diogenes, the barrel-dwelling philosopher who famously mocked Alexander the Great, dropped another bombshell that still ripples through global politics today: his declaration of being a citizen of the world. In an era when identity was rooted in city-states and bloodlines, this was more than cheeky defiance. It was a radical rewrite of human belonging. Picture the scene: Athenian elites boasting of their ancestry, Spartan warriors defining themselves by battle codes, and here's Diogenes, grubby and grinning, announcing allegiance to no flag but the sky itself. His cosmopolitanism wasn't about passports or travel. It was a spiritual mutiny against the tribal divisions that fueled endless wars. Fast forward to the wreckage of World War II, and you'll find Diogenes' ghost haunting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. When drafters asserted that rights belong to all people without distinction of any kind, they were channeling his vision of a shared humanity transcending borders. Modern humanitarian NGOs operate on this principle: doctors without borders treating patients based on need, not nationality, or activists defending refugees under the banner of human rights, not tribal loyalty. The cynic's gnarled finger points directly at today's paradox. We've built a globalized economy while clinging to nationalist mythologies, yet Diogenes would scoff at our sanitized version of cosmopolitanism. For him, world citizenship wasn't about elite jet-setters collecting visas or corporations exploiting cheap labor abroad. It demanded dismantling the mental barriers that separate us from them. When he carried a lamp in daylight searching for an honest man, he wasn't just performing, he was exposing how arbitrary our in-groups are. Modern psychology confirms this bias. Studies show we instinctively favor those who share even trivial similarities, from sports teams to birthday months. The cynic's challenge to consciously override these primal impulses, recognizing the stranger's humanity before their ethnicity or accent. Globalism's critics warn of eroding local culture, but Diogenes anticipated this tension. His barrel wasn't just a minimalist stunt. It symbolized that roots can be portable, that home isn't a plot of land but a way of being. Digital nomads and diaspora communities live this reality today, blending traditions into hybrid identities. The Maasai teenager coding in Nairobi, the Syrian chef reinventing Chinese letter Chinese letter Chinese letter Chinese letter Chinese letter Chinese letter. They're proving culture isn't zero-sum. Even the humble emoji, a truly borderless language, carries echoes of the cynic's dream. A grin means joy in every time zone. The darkest test of cosmopolitanism comes during crises. When COVID vaccines were hoarded by wealthy nations or when climate accords buckle under national interests, we betrayed Diogenes' ideal. Yet grassroots movements, from climate strikers uniting across continents to crowdsourced disaster relief, keep the flame alive. The cynic knew true world citizenship isn't declared but enacted, not in grand treaties but in daily choices. The vegan opting for fair trade coffee, the investor divesting from oppressive regimes, the teenager correcting a racist meme. His legacy isn't a blueprint but a provocation. If we're all citizens of the world, where do we draw the line on empathy? When a factory collapses in Bangladesh or a war starves Yemen, is it their tragedy or ours? Diogenes would have answered with action, not rhetoric, perhaps by selling his barrel to fund aid, then mocking those who praised him for it. In an age of walls and algorithms that divide, his ragged laughter still calls us to look beyond the flickering shadows of nationalism and meet the light. Aristotle cracked the code of persuasion 24 centuries ago, and we've been using his playbook ever since, often without even realizing it. While his teacher Plato feared rhetoric's power to manipulate, Aristotle saw it as a neutral tool, like a scalpel that could heal or harm depending on the hand that wielded it. His groundbreaking analysis in rhetoric didn't just describe how speeches work. It revealed the psychological levers that move minds, dividing persuasion into three irresistible forces: ethos, credibility; pathos, emotion; and logos, logic. Picture a courtroom drama where the silver-haired lawyer, ethos, recounts a victim's heartbreaking story, pathos, before presenting DNA evidence, logos. That's Aristotle's triad in action. A formula so potent it still dominates every arena where words shape outcomes. Modern advertising runs on this ancient operating system. When a toothpaste brand hires a dentist in a white coat to explain fluoride science, logos, while showing kids laughing with cavity-free smiles, pathos, they're executing Aristotle's blueprint with billion-dollar precision. Political campaigns take it further, packaging complex policies into emotional narratives. Think of the hopeful torchbearer standing before sunrise vistas, pathos, flanked by Nobel laureates, ethos, citing economic statistics, logos. Even TED Talks follow the template. Speakers establish their credentials within the first 30 seconds, share a personal struggle midway, and conclude with data-driven solutions. The magic isn't in using one pillar, but in stacking them like interlocking gears. Yet Aristotle's most subversive insight was timing. He called it kairos, the art of seizing the opportune moment. A tweet about gun control lands differently after a mass shooting than during a budget debate. Nike's Colin Kaepernick ad, "Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything," exploded not just because of its message, but because it dropped during peak national anthem protests. Ancient rhetoricians trained to read crowds like weather vanes, adjusting arguments based on murmurs or fidgeting. Today, algorithms do this instantaneously. Facebook adds a /B test pathos-driven headlines against logos-focused ones, while AI tools like ChatGPT tailor responses to the user's perceived emotional state. The medium has changed, the calculus remains Aristotle's. the shadow of rhetoric looms darkest in propaganda and misinformation. Aristotle warned that without ethical grounding, persuasion becomes coercion, a lesson echoed when hate speech masquerades as free debate or when viral lies spread faster than their corrections. His distinction between dialectic seeking truth through dialogue and heuristic winning arguments at any cost predicts our current crisis. Social media rewards heuristic tactics, outrage, oversimplification, tribal signaling, while starving nuanced discourse. The irony: Aristotle's defenses work against his own weapons, teaching audiences to spot ethos building through irrelevant credentials. A celebrity endorses this vitamin or pathos-laden strawman. They want to destroy our way of life, inoculates them against manipulation. But here's where Aristotle transcends strategy. He believed great rhetoric serves both sides. Ancient Athenian juries heard prosecution and defense arguments back to back because truth emerged from friction. Modern equivalents, Oxford-style debates, bipartisan panels often fail because they prioritize spectacle over substance. The philosopher's real legacy isn't tricks to win arguments, but frameworks to elevate them. When a scientist patiently explains climate change to skeptics using local flood data, logos, farmer testimonials, pathos, and peer-reviewed authority, ethos, they're not just persuading, they're honoring rhetoric's highest purpose: to help people see clearly together. The next time you swipe past an ad, analyze a stump speech, or even craft a work email, listen for Aristotle's whispers that tug on your heartstrings. Pathos, the expert quote in small print; ethos, the percentage that sounds impressive but you're too busy to fact-check. Logos, thinly stretched. Master these forces and you'll do more than communicate, you'll resonate. Because persuasion isn't about being loudest, it's about being undeniable in ways our shared humanity can't ignore. These 30 ancient Greek philosophies aren't relics gathering dust in history books, they're living currents flowing through your daily life, often in ways you've never noticed. That moment you pause before reacting angrily to a text, that's Stoicism at work. The algorithm recommending your next song, Pythagorean harmonics translated into binary code. Even the self-help book on your nightstand and preaching mindfulness and minimalism, that's just Epicurus and Diogenes repackaged for the digital age. Science leans heavily on these ancient foundations without always realizing it. Democritus' atomic theory evolved into quantum physics. Aristotle's four causes resurface in modern engineering design principles. Heraclitus' flux mirrors today's chaos theory. Every time a biologist studies DNA's purpose or a psychologist discusses emotional regulation, they're speaking Greek literally. The smartphone in your palm runs on Platonic ideals, perfect mathematical forms translated into silicon and electricity, while social media platforms manipulate Gorgian rhetoric to shape what you believe is real. The business world thrives on repurposed Greek wisdom, agile management, that's Heraclitus' embrace of change, institutionalized, corporate social responsibility. Aristotle's ethics scaled globally. Even Silicon Valley's fail fast mantra echoes the skeptic's willingness to doubt and pivot. Modern leadership training programs teach emotional intelligence and ethical decision-making, concepts Socrates would have recognized instantly from his Athenian dialogues. Personal development movements are especially transparent in their debts. Minimalism owes much to Diogenes' barrel-dwelling defiance of materialism, the gratitude journaling craze. That's just Marcus Aurelius' meditations with nicer stationery. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, openly acknowledges its roots in Stoic philosophy, teaching patients to separate events from their interpretations exactly as Epictetus advised 2,000 years ago. But here's what the ancient Greeks understood better than our modern interpreters. Philosophy isn't meant to be consumed, it's meant to be lived. They didn't write abstract theories, they crafted operating systems for human flourishing. When Socrates drank hemlock rather than betray his principles, or when Zeno faced shipwrecks and exile with equanimity, They weren't performing. They were stress testing their ideas in the laboratory of lived experience. This brings us to you of these 30 philosophies, which ones actually speak to your life. Does Stoic resilience help you navigate workplace stress? Are you secretly a closet Epicurean, finding joy in simple meals with friends rather than flashy purchases? Maybe Plato's skepticism makes you question your news feeds, or Aristotle's golden mean helps balance parenting demands. The real power of these ideas emerges not when we study them, but when we let them rewire our thinking. So here's an invitation: let these 30 minds become your invisible counsel. The next time you face a tough decision, ask what Aristotle would prioritize, how Epictetus would reframe the challenge, or what Diogenes would mock about your hesitation. Share in the comments which philosophy resonates most, or better yet, how you've applied one recently. And if you want more conversations that bridge ancient wisdom and modern life, consider joining this community of fellow seekers. Because the unexamined life may not be worth living, but the examined one, that's where the adventure